Kendra has found herself in a dilemma. She has heard us say that if we're trying to protect and preserve our sleep, that can create struggles with sleep because those can become sleep efforts. On the other hand, she has heard us say that it's perfectly rational to do things to not have so much sleep disruption. But how can she, now that she's starting to do night shifts, do things to prevent sleep disruptions without creating safety behaviors that lead to insomnia? This and more we're going to talk about in this very episode. Hi there, and welcome to this episode of Insomnia Insight, in which we're going to see how you can reduce sleep disruptions without creating safety behaviors that lead to or maintain the sleep struggle that we call insomnia. And this all really comes from a question from Kendra. And we're going to look at an email from Kendra, answer Kendra's questions, and hopefully I'll help you as well as Kendra. Now, before we do that, I just want to talk a little bit about the summer. Those of you who are longtime followers, you'll remember that last summer we had our summer series where we took some of our favorite episodes with a new intro and kind of rewatched them and learned from some kind of key episodes that we had. This year, I asked the community, that is our newsletter, to pick their favorites. And so people in our community have submitted their favorites, and I'm gonna record like a new intro, highlighting why somebody thought this was a great episode for them, why it led to a shift for them, and then we're gonna watch a favorite episode. And I may also create some brand new content over the summer. I always intend to do that, but there's traveling, the kids are not in school, so we'll see how much of that happens. But there's definitely going to be the summer series. We have some interviews lined up as well, but just a heads up that summer is a little bit different here on the channel. But with that said, let's get right into this episode and the email that prompted this episode of Insomnia Insight. Here is Kendra says, "Hi, Dan. Huge fan of your channel and use your app BedTyme, and it has really changed my life. Thank you so much for that." So glad to hear this, Kendra. Thank you for all the support. And we live for comments like this or to hear this. So that's really makes me glad. Now, I am returning to work, working shift work after being off with my baby. I developed insomnia in the time I have been off work, so I never dealt with it while also working shifts. I feel I'm mostly recovered and actually feel good about going back to work now. Super glad to hear this. Congratulations on your baby, and so glad that you are ready to go back to work. Right now, I only sleep at night and don't find any noise like keeping me awake. When I work nights, though, I will sleep during the day with a lot of noise from my family, used to use a sound machine pre-insomnia. I am just feeling confused about some things that you mentioned in videos regarding sleep disruption. You've mentioned here and there that it's okay to do things that are practical to reduce sleep disruption, especially as a shift worker, such as using earplugs, curtains for darkness, or to not have a coffee right before bed. I really see all these things as ways to protect sleep, though, since they are done to avoid sleep disruption. Am I getting this wrong? I just don't want to be woken up 55 times during the day, but also don't want to reinforce the idea that wakefulness is a threat by trying to block sleep disruption. Hope that makes sense. No need to respond if you don't have the bandwidth, or maybe you could make a video on sleep disruption. Thanks, Kendra. Thank you, Kendra, for sharing this or for highlighting this. And I, of course, asked Kendra for permission to share this. But I think it's a really nice and insightful question. So I thought we would start by talking about sleep disruptions versus insomnia. And if you, by the way, go to Google and Google like Insomnia Insight, sleep disruption versus insomnia, you'll find an episode on this channel dedicated entirely to this topic. I think it's a very helpful topic. Basically, the thing is that there are many, many things in life that can disrupt our sleep, that can make us have a little bit of choppy sleep. For example, you fell and hurt your ribs, right? That's gonna be painful and keep you from sleeping well. The the mosque near your house installed new speaker systems, and the call outs for prayer are going to disrupt your sleep. That can happen. Or you have you're sleeping in a new environment. You just moved, and you're not comfortable in the new bed or something. That can disrupt. There's just like a million things can disrupt our sleep, but that's entirely different from the self-perpetuating ongoing struggle that we call insomnia, which is rooted in our brain thinking of not sleeping as a threat. We can have insomnia without any sleep disruption because our wakefulness at night comes from our brain thinking of not sleeping as a threat. It's self-perpetuating. It's our brain thinking like, oh no, not sleeping is a threat. That shouldn't be happening. We try to prevent that. We introduce effort. The more we're trying to sleep, the less we sleep. The more we find ourselves awake, the more the brain goes like, oh no, I'm awake. The threat is really here. That's insomnia. Sleep disruption is, you know, oh, I'm having some choppy sleep because my neighbor is noisy, and that's annoying. But we don't think of not sleeping as a threat. We think of it just as like, of course, my sleep is disrupted because I'm going through menopause, for example. Of course, my sleep is disrupted because I'm having a baby. Of course, my sleep is disrupted because of this and that. That's sleep disruption. So sleep disruption, can come from many reasons, and many things can disrupt our sleep without us thinking of them or the disrupted sleep as a threat, which is like what I illustrated with somebody who's saying like, oh, I'm going through menopause, and of course, my hot flashes are keeping me awake. The sleep disruption is not thought of as a threat, or the fact that we're awake is also not thought of as a threat. So again, there's a clear difference between the two. Now, not only is this true for you know the realm of sleep, but this is actually true for life at large. There are many things that can happen to us in our life that is disruptive, that is maybe painful, that is unwanted, that we still don't think of as a threat. And I just wrote down a couple of examples, random examples. When you're walking somewhere and you realize like there's this like pebble in your shoe, and it's kind of annoying, then you can remove your shoe and take out the pebble without teaching the brain that pain is a threat or danger, right? It's just a practical thing you do. Nobody likes to feel pain. For all of us, pain is like unwanted, not preferred, something we don't like. But that's entirely different from thinking like, I can't feel pain. Pain is a threat. I don't want to feel pain. Like pain is dangerous, right? Those are two different things. And we can do practical things like removing that pebble just so we don't have to experience pain without us teaching the brain that there's a threat. Or we can use an umbrella without teaching our brain that being wet is a threat to us. It's just like a practical thing we do because it's more comfortable, right? And similarly, we can install blackout curtains simply because we know that bright light in the morning is disruptive to our sleep, right? And so on the other hand, we also know that when we have a struggle with sleep, a big part of that is all the things we do to try to protect and preserve our sleep, right? We have one night of a little sleep, and then our brain goes like, oh no, this can't happen again. We have to protect, we have to prevent this. What can we do? Take some melatonin. We take some melatonin, but this becomes this effort. It makes us try to sleep, and then we have another night of not sleeping because we're trying to escape the threat of not sleeping. We're trying to chase, sleep, right? And so, how do we tell one from another? Is the question here. How do we know if installing blackout curtains, for example, if there's sleep effort, if there's kind of this like attempt to control and protect and preserve sleep, or if they're just common sense? So, in a way, like going back to Kendra's letter here, Kendra said something like they like installing blackout curtains. They are a way for me to try to protect sleep, right? So isn't that a sleep effort? It isn't automatically sleep effort, right? We all do things because we want to lose sleep disruption without thinking of like not sleeping as this threat, as this enemy, as this having this aversion towards it. But how can we find kind of like what it is? Like, is this a sleep effort or is this just common sense? I think a key thing is like asking yourself how you think or feel when you imagine having these blackout curtains, right? So you can even just imagine installing them, and if you then find yourself thinking like, I hope they'll work. They better work. I pray that they will work. If they don't work, I don't know what to do. if there's kind of like this strong emotional response, then you can see that this is like a sleep effort. Like there's this fear inside me, there's this anxiety inside me, this is like hope that this will work type of thing. On the other hand, if you think about installing the background, and you're like, it would be nice if this prevented some light coming in because light is disruptive, but there's no particular emotional reaction. Like it's just a practical thing you're doing. Then like that's the way to know. Essentially, if there's a strong like emotional reaction, then there's some effort there. If you sense that I I I I think this can work and it's a nice thing to do without a strong emotional reaction, no effort there. Another way you can tell is like after the fact. If you, let's say, install those blackout curtains and you slept well, if you find yourself thinking, "Oh my gosh, what relief this worked. I hope it works again. Like, I pray it works another time." Then you're like, "Oh, here's this idea that sleep can be controlled and preserved in kind of like A to B fashion. Like if I do this, I protect my sleep." And that's again the kind of evidence of this like effort trying to control. On the other hand, if you're like, "Oh, that was nice. I slept easier without so much light," and there's no emotional um, involvement there, then you see that this was just the practical, commonsensical things that you were doing. Now, what if? So here comes another question. What if you note that indeed, when you think of the blackout curtains, if you think about just installing them, or you think of uh, or you think that, oh, they really worked, like they protected your sleep, and there's a lot of relief coming from that, but there's anxiety about the next night. If you see that, oh, these blackout curtains, they have become a sleep effort. They are a sleep effort for me. Then you actually don't need to uninstall them. And there's the typo here that I'm going to have to correct here. You actually don't need to uninstall them, because guess what? If we think like this, if we think like, oh no, these blackout curtains have become a sleep effort for me. They're this like safety behavior that maintains the idea that not sleeping is a threat. I have to get rid of them so that I don't have any sleep efforts, so that I can sleep. Guess what? We've created what we call a counter effort. A counter effort is where we think that we have to get rid of a sleep effort so that we can sleep, which is just, it's the same thing again. It's again the intent of that. The intent now of getting rid of a sleep effort is to try to sleep, which is another form of effort. So the key thing I want to introduce here, or share here, is that if you found that whatever you do has this element of effort to it rather than just common sense, the key is just to see that, to understand that. You don't have to change anything, because this effort, it's like a secret. As soon as it's a secret is revealed, it doesn't exist anymore. As soon as we start to understand efforts, we see our efforts, then you know they no longer have any power. The influence they have over us and our sleep and our experience diminishes, because we're not just mindlessly trying. We're not, oh, I've been trying to control things that can't be controlled. I've been deploying effort here. That automatically reduces effort, automatically takes us to a place where things are more and more peaceful. So the key, or I guess if we summarize this, I would say, like, knowing what you now know, you can definitely do many things as just this practical, commonsensical things to just not have so much disruption without creating any insomnia struggle whatsoever. Now, before we conclude, I just want to go back into Kendra's email and make sure that we answered everything. And in particular, I'm thinking about the sentence here. I just don't want to be woken up 55 times during the night, but also don't want to reinforce the idea that wakefulness is a threat by trying to block sleep disruption. And again, sleep disruption is something, none of us wants that. None of us likes our sleep to be disrupted, but we can definitely be in a place where we, like all humans, we don't want our sleep to be disrupted. But if it is disrupted, we don't think that is like a threat or a danger or something we kind of desperately need to avoid. We can see that if our sleep is disrupted, well, that's not something we like, but we're willing to experience that while still, doing what we can to have less sleep disruption. So I hope this made sense to you, Kendra, and everyone else in the community. And always, feel free to share your comments in the comment section or questions, and I will try to do my best to answer every comment. But I'll conclude there. Thanks so much, and I look forward to having you here for our summer series. Bye for now. Hi, it's me, Daniel, and I hope the video you just watched made a ton of sense for you. That's, of course, what it's there for, to help you find the answers that lead away from insomnia into a place of peaceful sleep for the rest of your life. We share everything we know freely for this reason. However, finding the answers that are relevant to your specific circumstances may require some time and bandwidth that you may not have. Maybe you have a demanding job. Maybe you have children that rely on you. Maybe you have other obligations that take up much of that time and bandwidth that could have been so helpful on your path of leaving insomnia. If this sounds like your situation, then we have the perfect solutions for you, the Insomnia Immunity program or BedTyme. In both of these programs, we have a curriculum where the key teachings are laid out in a structured step-by-step fashion, so you don't have to search for them. There's also somebody who understands insomnia, who can answer your questions in a timely way, so you don't have to spend your time and your bandwidth searching for those key answers. If either of these options sound like something you'd like to explore, then go to our website, thesleepcoachschool.com. And if you decide to join, we look forward to seeing you on the other side.